in the 12th century. His name was Judah ben Samuel. He made some interesting and very specific prophecies of Jerusalem and Israel's future. And I think it's kind of interesting right now with what's going on that I've kind of condensed this a little bit from what it was when I read it originally. But I just ran into it. I read it years ago. And I just ran into it again. And it seems to have more meaning now that our president just recognized that in December that Jerusalem was the capital of Israel. So, but Judah ben Samuel in the 12th century, he predicted the Ottoman Turks would conquer Jerusalem and rule over Jerusalem for 8 jubilees. Then Jerusalem would become a no man's land for 1 jubilee. Now remember, he's saying this in the 12th century, actually 12th, 13th century. It was 1217 when he actually made this prediction. But he said that Jerusalem will become a no man's land for 1 jubilee, and in the 9th jubilee it will return to the possession of the Jewish nation, which he believed would signify the beginning of the Jewish messianic end times. 300 years later, long past his death, it began to come true. Remember, 1 jubilee is 50 years. In 1517, the Ottoman Turks conquered the Mamluks after they had reigned in Jerusalem since 1250. The Turks remained for 400 years, or 8 jubilees. 8 times 50 equals 400 years. Then they were conquered in 1917 by the British, and the League of Nations, now the United Nations, confirmed the mandate for the Holy Land in Jerusalem to the British. That means from 1917, under international law, Jerusalem was a no man's land. Again, which was predicted by Judah ben Samuel. That is until 1967, when Israel captured Jerusalem in the Six-Day War. Exactly 1 jubilee, 50 years after 1917. And again, Jerusalem reverted to Jewish Israeli ownership. And according to Judah ben Samuel, the Jewish Messianic end times began at that point in 1967. I just want to recap this prediction. In AD 1217, he prophesied that the Ottoman Turks would rule over Jerusalem for 8 jubilees. He made this prediction 300 years before the Turks seized control of Jerusalem in 1517. So if in fact 1517 was a jubilee year, as Judah ben Samuel believed it was, then his prophecy was correct. And 400 years after the Turks took control of Jerusalem, they were driven from the city in 1917 by the Allied forces under the command of General George Allenby. And coincidentally, the day he entered the city, Jerusalem, it was Hanukkah. And as Judah ben Samuel had prophesied, during the 9th Jubilee, Jerusalem became a no man's land. By the way of the League of Nations British mandate in 1917, it actually belonged to no nation at all. So for 50 years, it was exactly as he said. Even after that, even after Israel's 1948-49 War of Independence, Jerusalem remained divided by a strip of land that ran through the heart of the city. Jordan controlled the eastern part of the city, and Israel controlled the western part of the city. That strip of land down the middle was called no man's land by both the Israelis and the Jordanians. That was during those 50 years. Even though they had actually won the right to be a country back in 1948, it still remained a no man's land down the middle of the city. Then, as a result of the Six-Day War in 1967, the entire West Bank of the Holy Land was conquered by the Israeli army, and the whole city of Jerusalem passed back into the possession of Israel, making his last Jubilee prediction ending in 2017. Now, according to the rabbi, we've been in the Jewish Messianic period for the last 50 years. Obviously, that's not the case. He expected the Jewish Messiah to come during that time, someplace between 1967 and 2017. But I find it very interesting that on December 6, 2017, President Trump officially recognized Jerusalem as the capital of Israel. And you just think of these things, to the world, they don't mean much. To the world, they don't mean much. But not only did this rabbi predict that, these things that have been predicted in the Bible have been coming to fruition during our lifetime. Just one thing after another, after another, after another. It's just amazing. And it's supposed to be, we're supposed to be in the last generation from 1948 to the end is supposed to be the last generation. Now, whether a generation is 40 years, 70 years, or 100 years, that's always up in the air. But it's possible that we'll see the end times begin to come into play in a deeper, more significant way. We're in what's called birth pangs right now. According to Jesus in Matthew, he said that as we progress closer and closer to the last days, it'll be like a woman beginning to feel the birth pangs of her baby coming, and then the baby will be birthed. And so, and of course, as all of us guys know, and we're very familiar with this, guys, that the birth pangs come and they become quicker and quicker and quicker, smaller and smaller times of duration, right? I mean, if I got that right? And then the baby comes, and that's when the real pain begins. And all of us guys, we of course have suffered through that ourselves and understand that pain and can sympathize with the ladies. But anyhow, we have some real pain coming if that's the case. And according to Jesus, that is the case, and we're in that time. And the real pain is going to come, yet to come. And it's really the birth of the earth back to the owner of the earth. God created the earth. He gave it to man. He gave us dominion over the land. We surrendered that to Satan through sin, and he's had his period of time, which is 6 days or 6,000 years, to rule this earth from his place in the spiritual heavenlies above earth. And there's a time coming, and we're going to read about it a little bit today, that he's going to be thrown down. We studied a little bit last week that Michael will throw him down to earth, and then we'll see what happens then. But let's go into Revelation 13. I'm going to read Revelation 13 from beginning to end, and then we're going to come back and just take a piece of it and work on it today, okay? Revelation 13:1. Then I stood on the sand of the sea, and I saw a beast rising up out of the sea, having 7 heads, 10 horns, and on his horns 10 crowns, and on his heads a blasphemous name. This is interesting, and I'm going to talk about it because this has been many times prophesied in the Old Testament by Daniel and other prophets. They've talked about this time. But now the beast which I saw was like a leopard. Now, we see this, and we've been talking through Revelation that most of it hasn't been symbolic. Most of it has been actually what we saw. And then in chapter 12, we began to see much more symbolism instead of actual things taking place. And this is obviously symbolic, but what is it symbolic of? And we're gonna discover more of that now. Now the beast which I saw was like a leopard. His feet were like the feet of a bear, and his mouth like the mouth of a lion. The dragon gave him power. So the dragon, of course, is Satan. Dragon gave him power, his throne, and great authority. And I saw one of his heads, if it had been mortally wounded, and his deadly wound was healed. All the world marveled and followed the beast. So they worshiped the dragon who gave authority to the beast, and they worshiped the beast, saying, "Who is like the beast? Who is able to make war with him?" Revelation 13:5, and he was given a mouth speaking great blasphemies, and he was given authority to continue for 42 months. Then he opened his mouth in blasphemy against God, to blaspheme his name, his tabernacle, and those who dwell in heaven. That's a lot of people to blasphemy. But anyhow, it was granted to him to make war with the saints and overcome them, and authority was given him over every tribe, tongue, and nation, and all who dwell on the earth will worship him, whose name have not been written in the book of life, the Lamb slain from the foundation of the world. And we're going to take each one of these in sections and go through this, but I can't help but when I go through this to say, doesn't this resonate with what we've been studying? Doesn't it resonate with what Jesus said at the Olivet Discourse? Doesn't it resonate with what we studied in Revelation 12 and what we studied in previous chapters of Revelation as we get towards the end about saints? And it was granted to him to make war with the saints and to overcome them. That's mind-boggling to me, but that's what it says, because typically I and so many people have really taken the escapism route instead and say, well, we're going to be taken out and we're not going to suffer this. And that's fine if we live in Disneyland. And that's kind of where we are in America, although it's digressing quickly. We've lived in kind of a Leave It to Beaver, Ozzie Nelson world, you know, the Beach Boys and all that kind of stuff. And I know you guys are younger than me, so you might not recognize some of those things. But we have seen such a degradation of America just going in the wrong direction that it's easy to see. You know, 20 years ago, you couldn't have convinced me of this stuff. I would have said the church is going to escape and we're never going to have to worry about this. But the more and more I see what's going on in the world, and it's particularly the United States, and unfortunately, we're kind of the leaders in many of these things. We take the stand first, and then other countries come in behind us, and it's going in the wrong direction. And I'm beginning to see that the church will probably have to face some of what they call the first half of tribulation. Again, I want to remind you, it never says in the Bible that those 7 years of Daniel's 70th week, it never says that they are the tribulation. It starts in the second half. In the last 3.5 years, Christ called it the Great Tribulation. But that's not until the second half. So what we'll be going through before that time, before the Antichrist really makes his way onto the stage in a profound way with the sacrifice in Jerusalem, until he does that, we may not know when it actually starts. We may not know actually when the first 3.5 years starts. Other than we studied last week, and we'll talk about that in a minute, we studied last week in Revelation where Satan began to attack the woman in a greater and greater way. The woman being the seed of Eve, that being all of mankind, that he began to attack all of mankind in a greater and greater way. But God protected us. And then we talked about him trying to flood us out like like Noah's flood, and God protected us. But there's coming a time, and you'll see it in a few minutes when we get to it, is Satan's going to turn particularly on the Christians. So it was granted him to make war against the saints and to overcome them. And authority was given him over every tribe, tongue, and nation, all who dwell on the earth and worship him, whose names have not been written in the book of life of the Lamb slain from the foundations of the world. Now, something that's happening here, and you'll see it, is he was thrown down. And we'll read that again in a minute from Revelation 12. As he was thrown down, up till now, up until that point where he's thrown down to earth, although he's manipulated mankind, it's been mankind doing to himself. You know, we remember the old Flip Wilson saying, you know, the devil made me do it. Well, the devil never made us do anything. And the devil's brought murderous things to the world, but he's not done the murdering. He may have inspired the Mao Zedongs, he may have inspired the Hitlers, they may have committed their lives to him, I don't know, but he hasn't actually attacked any of us or killed any of us. So there's got to be proof positive for God to convict him and throw him into everlasting punishment, because he has got to actually murder. And what we're going to see is, we move forward, we'll see that he actually, at one point, the Antichrist is killed, and the devil will actually take possession of the Antichrist. And whether he'll be partially alive or not, I was thinking, I mentioned this last week, I think of the cockroach in the Men in Black or whatever it was, you know, and how he got inside that guy's body. And, you know, that's very typical. Somewhere along the line, Satan is going to animate the Antichrist, or the beast that's killed. And so when he begins to actually kill us, and it sounds awful that he would begin to kill the Christians, but as he actually kills us, he's lost that distance. See, now he can say, well, I didn't kill anybody. I didn't make Eve eat that apple. All I did was suggest it. I haven't killed anybody. I didn't cause all these massive wars. This has been men killing each other. This has been the angel on the red horse. This isn't me. You know, I inspire false religions. I inspire angst against you so that they hate you, Father. but I have not actually killed anybody. But he's going to actually kill people in the Revelation. He's going to kill Christians, and he's going to kill God's children, and he will spend eternity in damnation because of that. But anyhow, let me keep reading. So if you question how come God would ever let him kill us, well, we aren't killed as, as humans. We're all aging, we're all dying, we're all getting older and less animated, less active, and we, each one of us, see as death encroaches. We have friends that pass away. When you get my age, you start to hear of friends that have passed away, and it just surprises you. And and we're terminal beings. We're going to live a certain amount of time, and that's it. And it's hard for young people to cope with that because they're raising their kids, and they're all excited about doing everything they're going to do, and taking trips and vacations and planning family get-togethers and on Facebook and all that stuff. And they're excited about those things. Or not, but depending on how much you like Facebook. But it's kind of like a positive growing thing. And then you kind of hit an age where you start to say, gee, this never hurt before. I used to be able to do this and that didn't, Margie wanted a new faucet. I make huge mistakes sometimes. I went to Menards, that's a home store, and I was with my grandson. And I've been looking for a faucet, with a kind of a loop on it from our basement bathroom faucet, because whenever I want to rinse anything else off, it's all right, it's too close. You can't get anything underneath it. So I wanted one of those faucets that kind of went up like that. Well, my youngest grandson, Eli, was with me, and we're going through the store, and I said, I just really need a really cheap one. I don't want an expensive one at all. And he says, there's one, Papa, that's $39. And come to find out, it was $5 off, so it was only $34. And then they have their famous 11%, so now it's $31, right? And I'm saying, okay, I'll get that one, because all the rest were $90, $70, $80. I'll get that one. Well, here's the downside of it. It has an internal little generator in it. You ever heard of a faucet with a generator in it? And when you turn on the water spins the generator, and it lights a light. And the water actually lights up. You turn on the faucet and it lights up, and you wash your hands. You can see it go in the bathroom in the dark, right? Turn on the faucet and the room lights up. I mean, it literally lights up the room. So I thought that was cool, right? So I installed that in the basement, and that's cool, right? No, because Margie saw it. My wife saw it. And you know what happens then? You got to install one in all the bathrooms, right? So I've been doing that. And I built the house 40 years ago, and I've never touched the upstairs bathroom really for anything, because it was the boys' bathroom, and we just don't, you clean it and all that, but I've never really made any real modifications, a new floor, new wallpaper, something, but nothing really fancy. And she says, I want one of those up there in that bathroom. And I started tearing into that thing, and I thought I was coming apart and getting old. I started pulling drain parts off and all this kind of stuff to put this new thing in, and plastic broke. Plastic pipe was great when I was building the house, but when you're starting to take it apart, and it hasn't been taken apart for 40 years. So I had to go and find special parts for it. But what I noticed is the last few days, when I get up, I'm crawling under the sink, right? And it's got two little doors on it, so there's only room for, you got to kind of turn about 6 different ways to get in there. And you get in there, and it keeps leaking because it won't seal up right. And I've been in, and I find out when I get up the next morning, it's like, why does this hurt? This never used to hurt, right? That never hurt before. Well, it'll be all right in a day or two. Well, when you get my age, the day or two turns into a week or two, and it doesn't, finally it starts to get better, but you're like, this used to go away the next day, or sometimes it didn't even hurt at all, and you're aching, and you bend this, you feel that, and you bend that way, and so we're really understanding at our age, and I know nobody else here is as old as I am, but when you get our age, you begin to understand that you're not going to live forever, and so we are terminal beings. So sometimes, and I know people kind of don't agree with me on this a lot. I've said this for many years, because when people say, well, if God is so good, why does he let people die and stuff like that? And I've always felt in my heart that life in this world means a lot more to us than it does God. He is looking forward to an eternal bride. He's looking forward to an eternal relationship. And he kept shortening lives. The first group lived almost 1,000 years. The second group was the 300, 400, 500 years, and then it was down to 100 and some years. And then Moses put out a bulletin for us: you get 70 and lucky if you get 80. And so you look at that and say, well, gosh, what's God doing? Well, he's anxious to see his bride. He knows that we're eternal beings and we're going to be with him forever. And so when you read these texts and he says the dragon has authority to kill us, you're like, how could God do that? But it's not, this life is not nearly as important as the next life. And that should inspire us to share our faith with people. Because, it's amazing how when you have a little ache or pain, you can find a dozen people and say, well, try this. This worked for Aunt so-and-so. And oh, try that. And oh, you need to get one of these operations. You need to get, and boy, they'll talk about that. And you'll say, well, what about eternal life? What have you done with your, oh, no, don't talk to me about that. They don't want to talk about the Lord. But we need to talk to people about the Lord, because that's what's important to God. Not this thing's all going to burn up. It flooded once, the next time it burns up. It's all going to burn up. And we're going to get a new heaven and new earth. We're going to live with God forever. What an incredible thought. That song that you were singing, No More Tears, it's incredible. It's incredible where we're headed. But it sounds like a downer. Pastor, why don't you talk about, fun things, and food, fun, and fellowship. Let's do that instead. And the church has kind of gotten caught up in that and lost context with what's really happening here. And we don't see life and death near as much on this in this nation as other people do in other nations where there's genocide of Christians and stuff. So I guess the reality is some of us are going to die, and some of us are going to blast up into heaven. So I'm planning on doing the rapture thing. That sounds like pretty exciting. Although I have had some bouts with, I watched this TV program the other day. I was watching some crazy kids station, it's called QU or something, and I was just flipping through the stations, and these people were diving off of bridges like 500-600 feet in the air with a bungee cord. They go, and then they bounce back, and I don't think I could do that. But I'm all for going up. That's got to be an interesting situation, doesn't it? You think about it. You go up in a plane, and if you jump out the door, if you don't have a parachute, you're going to fall, and it's not going to be a good end. I mean, it's good until you get to the end, but it's got to be exciting, flying and everything. But the end is really a bad deal. But going up, that's got to be cool, doesn't it? That's got to be. And the elevator doesn't stop till you get to heaven with Jesus. Oh my gosh, what an exciting time. But anyhow, it says he's going to allow them to overcome us, and authority was given him over every tribe, tongue, and nation. All who dwell, I'm in verse 8 now, all who dwell on the earth will worship him, whose names have not been written in the book of life. That's a scary thought, isn't it? I think I'd want my name to be written in the book of life, but of the Lamb slain from the foundation of the world. If anyone has an ear, let him hear. He who leads into captivity shall go into captivity. This is interesting. We'll talk about this when we get down to there, but he who is kills with the sword must be killed with the sword. Here is the patience of the faith of the saints. He's saying, be patient, because revenge is mine, saith the Lord. Don't try and get revenge yourself. God will take care of that. And then Revelation 13:11, when I saw another beast coming out of the earth, and he had two horns like a lamb and spoke like a dragon, and he exercises all authority of the first beast in his presence, and causes the earth and those who dwell in it to worship the first beast whose deadly wound was healed. This is going to be exciting when we get to this stuff. And I've got the rest of Revelation here. And I'll keep reading it for a minute. He who performs great signs that even makes fire come down from heaven on earth in the sight of men. Boy, he's going to be really impressive. He deceives those who dwell on the earth by those signs which he is granted to do in the sight of the beast, telling those who dwell on the earth to make an image to the beast who was wounded by the sword and lived. He was granted power to give breath to the image of the beast, that the image of the beast should not speak, and cause as many as would not worship the image of the beast to be killed. That's probably us. I'm not going to worship. Are you going to worship? Daniel didn't worship. The three brothers or sons or whatever they are, they didn't worship. The three young men that was with Daniel, they didn't worship. They went into fire and came out all right. Revelation 13:16, he causes all, both small and great, rich and poor, free and slave, to receive a mark on the right hand on their foreheads. This is why I kept reading. I want to finish this up, and then we'll go back and start over again. But you know, this is such a thing that it just goes on and on what it is. I love to listen to some old videos, you know, and old movie films that have been turned into YouTube and that sort of thing, and some of these old preachers, and they talk about what the mark of the beast was, and it's so interesting to hear the evolution of the mark of the beast. You know, during World War II, they were stenciling numbers on, or tattooing numbers onto the Jews before they killed them, to keep track of who they were and all that, and they all had a number on them, and there was a file on them. You know, and this is something you don't know. I hate to be a spoil sport all the time, but they kept track of all the Jews by a number that they tattooed on their arm, and then they could look up whether that person was you know, capable of doing certain jobs. If they could repair Jeeps, then, you know, they might keep them to repair Jeeps. If they could, you know, do certain manufacturing jobs. If they couldn't really do anything productive, then they'd use them until, you know, in a factory, they'd use them until they were just worn out, and then send them to the chambers, the gas chambers. But they tracked all these people. And you know who tracked them? IBM. IBM made the machines and the punch cards. Remember the old IBM punch cards? They made the machines and the punch cards that tracked the Jews. And it became such a negative thing in America that they actually spun that part of their company off to a German company, actually an Austrian company, and that company continued to make the machines for Hitler. But we continued to make the punch cards in the United States during World War II. Is that amazing? You don't know that stuff, do you? And now that's a huge, successful company in the United States, and we don't know that they actually, and they told them to stop several times, and they said, no, we're not taking sides on this. How can you not, you know, it's just amazing to me that any businessman could put money that much over lives. It's just, you think it was just Hitler. You think it was just Hitler that did this, but he had thousands and thousands of people that carried out his will. And when you think of IBM as being part of that, look it up. If you don't believe me, look it up. And so for a long time, they thought that was the mark of the beast, that IBM had created the mark of the beast. And it was only a matter of time before we all would get the mark. And even before that, the Social Security numbers, there was a lot of people who wouldn't take Social Security numbers. Pastors weren't required to take Social Security numbers and enter Social Security. You can still opt out of it now. I don't, but you can still opt out of Social Security if you're a pastor now, if you don't want to take the mark of the beast, because people thought that was the mark of the beast. They're still required to get their Social Security number though, but now they don't have to pay Social Security and Medicare if they don't want to. But of course, they don't benefit from it either. But it's an interesting thing, and we've seen it evolve. And then as I worked for a large computer company, they came out with a thing that the company that I work for happened to have developed the UPC code, which we have on all our packaging and stuff. And interestingly enough, I wasn't saved at the time, and this guy that worked for me came in, and he was an engineering manager, and he worked under me, and he came in with this thing, and he said, we'd gotten a little pamphlet explaining how the UPC code had been developed. And it was kind of magical because it was developed by one of the larger computers in the world at the time in Brussels, in Belgium, the Cray computer, and Cray worked for us. And they developed this. They ran the code, and what happened was, if you look at your UPC code, and I'm not going to show that or get into that, but the first bar is real long, the last bar is real long, and then there's a bar in the middle that's real long. And those numbers are 6. So so you can't buy or sell without the UPC code, which is kind of interesting. And so then it was okay. Everybody's going to get a tattooed barcode on their arm, but you know, actually, if you buy a magazine that's stocked manually, it only has the first 2. It doesn't have the third one because the last group is restocking and inventory. So so you can look at it and you'll see there'll be the long one, the middle one, and the last one, and they're all 6s. And they said that was the way the computer worked. Didn't mean a thing to me. And this engineer that worked for me was a born-again Christian. He came, look, it's the mark of the beast. I said, what are you talking about? I didn't know. And he brought me a little Gideon New Testament the next day and showed me where it said in Revelation the mark of the beast was 666. And I'm like, well, this is weird. It didn't affect my salvation, but I thought it was weird. But no one may buy or sell except one who has the mark or the name of the beast or the number of his name. Here is wisdom. Let him who has understanding calculate the number of the beast, for it is a number of man. His number is 666. And of course, that's the number of man is 6. The fullness of 6 is 3 sixes. Our fullness of our time is the 6,000 years. And then the seventh day, the earth will rest under the leadership of Jesus Christ for a millennium. So, and that'll be the seventh day. But there's a lot in one chapter. So let's dissect it a little bit at a time. And we'll begin by asking, when this is happening, what is it? What's the relationship to what we just studied in Revelation 12? Okay, Satan was characterized by a dragon, attacked the seed of Eve, but failed as Jesus ultimately took his rightful place of authority, seated at the right hand of the Father. Now you remember that was in Revelation 12. Satan tried to prevent Mary from having the baby, and we know that in a practical earthly sense he did that through trying to kill the baby through Herod. Remember, again, it's hands off. Satan inspires Herod to go and kill all the babies that are 2 years old and younger, trying to get rid of the Messiah before he gets into a position that he can become king. But of course, an angel came to Joseph and said, hey, sneak your family away to Egypt for a while, and he did, and brought him back, and so it was a done deal. And it goes on to say that he did his thing, and then he was taken up to heaven and taken his rightful place next to the Father, right? So he's seated. Satan didn't want that. He didn't want him to get up there in that position of authority, because he would take back the property earth. And Satan was wanting to keep the property earth, feeling like weak men would be a stepping stone. It would be a weakness of God. His love for man, his love for his creation would be a weakness that he could somehow get back at God with. I don't know. But anyhow, but Jesus ultimately took his rightful place of authority, seated at the right hand of the Father. And without getting a lot of trouble with this, I'll keep repeating it and keep repeating it. We, according to Ephesians, are seated in heavenly places next to him. We have that authority, and we don't take it. Most Christians are submissive to the world, submissive to the will of Satan, submissive to a lot of evil that's in the heavenly places. But theoretically, we as individuals are seated from a spiritual standpoint in the heavenly places next to Christ, which gives us authority over the enemy. He doesn't like that. But then we saw him thrown down. Satan took a third of his angels and began attacking the woman, who we discovered represents all mankind. Remember, we said he began to attack all mankind, using mankind, of course. He attacks mankind using all mankind. There's these huge world wars, and Mao Zedong killing millions and millions of people, like 30 million people, or some incredible number, and Hitler was 6 million. He was just a piker, wasn't he? But anyhow, it was, Satan has tried to inspire man to do this evil stuff, and he seems to be doing a pretty good job of it, because now we're at a point where there's enough nuclear weaponry on earth that we could easily wipe out man entirely. And praise God that we have leaders, and we need to pray for our leaders, that we have people that will hold that back. But so Satan took a third of his angels and began attacking the woman, who we discovered represents all mankind. But as we moved quickly to the end times, we saw God protecting mankind from total destruction by Satan, his fallen angels, and his human minions for 1,260 days, or the first half of Daniel's 70th week. That's 3.5 years. So you remember we said that. We said that the first, it's repeated. It seems like it's repeated in 12, where God takes the woman away for 3.5 years, and then later down in the chapter he takes a woman away for 3.5 years. But these are two different periods of time. Then there was the war in heaven, not the main heaven, but the heavenly realm above our earthly realm, where we're supposed to be battling the enemy. We don't battle against flesh and blood, but against spirituality and spiritual beings in high places, princes in high places. And we're superior to them, but we don't really know it, because we feel so weak and fleshly. And Michael and his angels conquered Satan and his angels, and threw them down to the earth, right? Now, and we talked about last week that this has been an authority thing. Jesus sent his 70 out in Luke 10, and in Luke 10, he sent them out with the authority of his name, and they came back and said, wow, we do all these miracles. Even Satan is, the demons are subject to us in your name. And he said, don't be surprised about that. I've seen Satan thrown down from heaven. Now, people think that means he was thrown down to earth, but he wasn't. He was thrown down from heaven to the spiritual realm above our earth, right? And God is ruling from heaven above that. Actually, he's ruling from where we can't even ever see him probably, but he chooses to reveal himself in heaven, and we'll be there with him, for the supper of the Lamb and spend eternity there with him eventually. But Jesus said, I've seen Satan thrown down. The key to that is, you got to understand this, the key to that is authority. See, if you read in the Old Testament, you'll read how he had diadems on his head and everything else. See, he was privy to God in the heaven, in the main heaven. He was privy to God. And he went there and accused us. He went there and said, what about your servant Job and all that kind of stuff? And he was privy to that. Then Jesus said, but I've seen him thrown down one. I've seen him taken down one. Now, I don't know exactly when that happens, and I haven't been able to find anybody who does, but I kind of think this. I kind of think it was when he was tempting Jesus for the 40 days, and Jesus passed all 3 tests, and that lost his authority over mankind because we failed. Because of the lust of the eyes, lust of the flesh, and pride of life, we failed in the garden. Man failed in the garden. Jesus didn't fail on all 3 of those same tests. He did not fail on those 3 tests. I think that's when Satan lost his authority in heaven. He had no more authority. He could work from the heavenlies, I'll call them the heavenlies, the spiritual realm above us, but he couldn't operate at the realm that God had created him at one time before he rebelled. So Jesus said, don't worry, I've seen him thrown down. I'd seen him thrown down. That meant he was subject to Jesus' name, right? He was subject to Jesus' name. He said, don't marvel by that. He says, marvel that your name is written in the Lamb's Book of Life. Because what's going to happen, guys, what's going to happen is you're going to get elevated to that place where you're over him even. You're even over him in that spirit realm. But see, nobody got that. And Christians, by and large, don't get that. And when you read in Ephesians where Paul says, oh, you have your seat in heavenly places. Oh, well, that's, someday when I get to heaven. No, that's right now. We have authority over Satan. But it's going to get worse for him. When Michael the archangel battles him in the heavenlies and says, you're taking edges you're not allowed to have. Because the earth doesn't belong to you anymore. It belongs to Jesus. Because he won it back with his death and resurrection. He won it back. He got the earth back. Adam and Eve lost it. Jesus got it back. He paid the price. And it's in Leviticus 26. It talks about how the younger brother can come and buy back the land, and it belongs to him. And then you become a servant to him. It says you're a slave to the mortgage owner, but when your younger brother buys back the land, it's very humbling because you were the older brother. You were the first brother. You were the first Adam. We're the heirs of the first Adam. And we have to humble ourselves and say, okay, the second Adam, Jesus Christ, he's called the second Adam in the epistles. We're called to be his servant. We're no longer a slave. Before we were a slave to Satan. Now we're a servant to Jesus when I give our lives to him. And we can serve him here on the earth. But he's called us to serve him on earth in a spiritual battle. We don't battle against flesh and blood. And if the church could get that right, see, we don't battle against flesh and blood because we're seated in heavenly places above that. We're above all that. But we don't grasp that. It's got to come by faith, and faith comes by hearing, and hearing by the Word of God. You got to know what your rights are. So the enemy attacks us, and we fight him. And I can identify areas where I'm weak in my faith by areas where I don't win the battles. I don't win the battles. As you know, I had three failed heart surgeries over about a 5-year period of time, 5-year period of time. And in the 5th, they wanted to do the 4th one in the 5th year. And I said, this is crazy. I'm a child of God. I am healed. I am healed. I began to discover my problem was I didn't really trust God. I had a spirit of kind of unloving. I didn't believe I was worthy of his love. Well, that was a lie, because I'm worthy of his love not by who I am. I'm worthy of his love by who Jesus is and what Jesus did. And so when I say, oh, I'm not worthy of his love, that's denying what the Bible says about what Jesus did for me. And so I had to come to grips with that and say, Father, I repent. I've been telling a lie about you, because I said I didn't think you really loved me, and my relationship was based on performance because of my Catholic background. And I thought, even though I knew I was saved by grace, there was still that little corner. And I think it's in everybody. I don't think it just has to be Catholic. It can be any religion that people get involved in, and it's a little bit of works. And you see, in a minute you pick up works as part of your salvation, you're in trouble, because what you've done is denied what Jesus did for you. And so I had to repent and say, God, I'm sorry. I didn't really realize all that Jesus had done. And I felt like he said to me, he says, Jim, did you read that part where it says it's finished? What else do I need to say to you? It's finished. And then he showed me that scripture in Ephesians that says, I'm accepted in the beloved. Wow, I'm accepted in the beloved. And 3 days later, I was laying on the operating table, and the surgeon that had told me a week before that I was probably going to have either a stent put in my bypass or another bypass surgery, and he'd discover it in the hospital. He'd already done it in his clinic, but he didn't want to go in there because he was afraid he'd tear the artery. It was too diseased. He goes in there in the hospital, puts me in the hospital. I'm laid out there, and right there he says, I believe you've received a healing from God. And that was 15 years ago, and I'm not on any medication, and I don't know. So anyhow, I discovered that God does heal. So I know there's areas where I've gotten above him on certain things, above the enemy on certain things, but there's certain things in my life that I haven't got above him on. I've got above on him on finances. When I went into the ministry, I believed that the only way I could survive was with my job. I had a good career. I had big bucks. I had big responsibility within a big Fortune 500 company, and responsibility for an aspect of the company for the whole U.S. And I thought, oh man, I can't stop this and go in the ministry. How am I going to pay my bills and feed my family and all this? And boom, just when I said I'll go do what you call me to do, just bang, 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 everything was paid for. We had people give us money for the ministry that paid for us to go out, and all of our salary was taken care of, our house was paid off, and not through the ministry. He just had things done. He knew what he was doing before he even called me into the ministry. Well, right around the time he called me in the ministry came Y2K. And I thought, I got to do something, because I knew enough about computers that something could happen. I didn't think it was going to be as tragic as everybody thought it was. But I thought, you know what, I'm just going to pay my house off. So I took the money out of my retirement fund and paid my house off. So when I went in the ministry, my house was paid for. That's one of the biggest, I don't know about you guys, but for a guy, that's one of the biggest things that hangs over your head, is you want to get that mortgage paid for. You get that mortgage out from underneath, otherwise you're going to be paying the rest of your life. Cars, that's one thing, but that mortgage, you want to get out from underneath that mortgage, so that if something happens, you can always go get a job and get them, some hot dogs and beans, but paying that mortgage, you don't want to be thrown out of your house. So it's a huge burden. So when I was free to that, it was like, wow, I can go do whatever God called me to do. I'm free now. And then little by little, he just took care of everything. He just took care of everything. And we've been just fine. But there was a big fear there. It was a big fear there. But I had to believe that I could trust God, that if I tithed, he had certain rules. He's got banking rules that he runs, and he says, you give here. And he doesn't want me to give there because he needs the money. He wants me to give there to change who I am inside about how I keep and give, right? So, because we tend to be selfish humans, and so I gave, and I said, okay, well, I gave, now you owe, and not like, I never put it quite like that to him because he is God, but, it was like, this should work out, and it did. And it just takes care of itself. God is so good. And if you could help people go there, if you could help people, but you can't. They have to find their way through the scriptures and through the Spirit as God leads them. So that failed, and so he took that, and another 3.5 years. Then there was a war in heaven. He got thrown down to earth. Now he's lost, and this hasn't happened yet, but we're being told. What's interesting is there's some people in here that have been in the military, and there's other people that are in the penal system, not employed in the penal system, not in the. But anyhow, you guys understand strategy and planning ahead, right? If you've been in the armed services, you know they don't wait until the enemy's knocking on the door to say, "Gee, what should we do?" You're planning ahead all the time. And why is that so difficult for Christians to understand? That's what God's trying to help us do in Revelation. He's trying to get us, because we're His army here on earth. And He says there's coming a time, right now, He says, right now you're in the heavenly places, in a spirit realm above the enemy, right? We have authority above the enemy. He's lost his authority. He lost his authority. He was thrown down with lightning. So He's down there. We're up there. We have authority over Him. And there's coming a time where He's going to get thrown down to earth. And when He gets thrown down to earth, it's going to get really difficult for Him because He's losing more authority. He won't be able to manipulate as many people when He's down here on earth. You know, it's much more difficult than you are when you're up there than when you're down here. So He's thrown down to earth, and it says, realizing he had little time left, Satan again turned against mankind. Satan tried to annihilate mankind with a flood, copying God. Remember we talked about that last week. He tried to copy God. God wiped out all the perverted angel men, you know, before Noah, and Noah was the only one found perfect in all his generations. And so even without, you know, God didn't even need ancestry DNA. He knew that Noah was still cool. So Satan said, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to put the Antichrist down here. I'm going to put the beast down here. And I'm going to put the prophet down here. And then I'm going to flood out mankind, and we're going to run this thing our way, have a merry old time, right? And mankind's all gone because all these stupid minions that I manipulated for all these years have failed me, right? They keep dying off anyhow. You know, I make them billionaires, and they do all kinds of crazy things, abort babies and everything else, and support abortion, support massive murder, support, you know, downsizing of mankind on earth, you know, and I don't know. You know, it's interesting, isn't it? Mankind says, these guys say, oh, we got to reduce the number of people on earth because the resources aren't there for the people. And you have to think about it. How many people, it started out with 2, and there's what, 8 billion, or what is some crazy number now? 6, 8 billion, somewhere in between there. And God's managed to feed them all. He's managed to feed them all. And they would all have not a problem at all if we weren't so selfish. We've got so much that we can't keep our weights down. And there's other people on the earth starving, and we're so selfish. But there's enough to go around if it wasn't for us. If it wasn't for our hearts. It's not just us. It's not just America. There's other countries where people were taking care of themselves and not taking care of others. You get to do God says, you know, I feed you. You want to feed others? I'll teach you how to be more like me. He's training His bride. But anyhow, again, God protected man. You know, the earth swallowed up the flood, and it didn't work for him. So Satan turns specifically on God's children, and that's kind of where we're headed today. Revelation 12:17, and the dragon was enraged with the woman, and he went to make war with the rest of her offspring and keep the commandments of God and have the testimony of Jesus Christ. Now, this is interesting. I want you to understand this. I talked a little bit about this last week, but I didn't really get into this part. Satan has been on the offensive. If you know football, you know, offensive, defensive. And he's been doing all the scoring, right? Because man dies out, and, you know, and he keeps racking up his points. And he's been on the offensive from the spirit realm, because only a small portion of us are actually God's children. It said the road is narrow, not many will go their way. You know, the road to destruction is broad, and many will go there. There's a lot more on his side than on God's side. And he's been using them to rack up the points. He's been using them to try and control the earth. And several times he's tried to wipe us out, or the Jews out, or whoever. He's always trying to wipe us out. And to some extent he's been pretty effective. But once he's thrown down to the earth, he's in trouble. He's in trouble. Now he's down another rung, right? And it's like, will we begin to get it then? You know, will we begin to get it then? And I say that because we're in a position higher than him, and we don't seem to get it. We don't seem to take authority and use the scriptures to our advantage. God has given us the scriptures of how things work. It's the manual of how things work. And He says, now I'm going to put you in this position, and I'm going to ask you to do this. And you might think of it in your world. You know, you're a manager over many other people, right? And And as they're trained to do certain things, you give them more responsibility. And they're always under you, but you give them more and more responsibility. And if you say, okay, I'm going to give you a raise because you're going to have this higher level of responsibility, and they say, hey, thanks, I appreciate that, and they take the money but never do the job, then there's a problem, right? See, we've been elevated to that higher level of responsibility, but the church is not doing the job. We're not doing the job that we were called to do. We're still fighting on the earth when we should be fighting in the heavenly places. But anyhow, but again, he loses authority. He's thrown down to the earth. He's lost all authority in the spirit realm. He's cast down to earth. He's got no authority in the spirit realm anymore. He's confronted with having to switch to a defensive plan. Now he's got to switch from offensive to defensive. Because he's losing ground, he's losing time. He knows that he's running out of time. He's just lost another level of authority. He was probably all right by getting thrown out of heaven. He didn't like those guys anyhow. So, he's down here in the spirit realm and puppeting all these people. And then suddenly, sorry, you're one of the people again. You're down here with the people. And he says, oh man, I gotta change my plan. I gotta change my plan. I don't have near the influence on all these people that I had before. So I got to do something. So you know what he does? It says he quits chasing the woman or the mankind. He quits chasing the offspring, right? And he chases the Christians. Because you know what? We're the only ones that can do him any damage. We're the only ones that, listen to this, Revelation 12:10. Then I heard a loud voice saying to heaven, now salvation. This is after he's thrown down. Now salvation and strength in the kingdom of our God and the power of Christ has come. For the accuser, our brethren who accused them before God day and night, has been cast down. They have overcome him by the blood of the Lamb and by the word of their testimony, and they did not love their lives to death. Therefore rejoice, O heaven, and all who dwell in them. But woe to the inhabitants of the earth and the sea, for the devil has come down to you, having great wrath, because he knows that he has a short time. You see why he begins to attack the Christians? Because we're the only ones who can do any damage to him. Because we can overcome him by the blood of the Lamb and the word of our testimony. We can undo what he's trying to do. We can, but see, he hasn't been brought down that low yet. But we can still do it today because we're seated in heavenly places. But it isn't a realization until he's thrown down to earth and then he's going to attack us because we're his only threat. We're only, all these other dumb humans, they followed me. They do what I tell them to do. They believe the fake news. They, anything I try and tell them, they just run with the ball, and they're a bunch of idiots. But he says, these Christians, we got to do something. He's got his third of his angels, but we got to do something with these guys because they can overcome us. They can beat us. And so God has given us that strategy. Remember I said there's a strategy when you get ready for war. You have a strategy where you're planned long before the war ever takes place. And God is trying to give us that strategy. We haven't even gone onto the level that we're supposed to go yet. We should be up there. And I can't tell you how to get there. You have to discover it yourself. It's got to come from the Word. It's got to come from a relationship with Jesus Christ. It's got to come from direction. See, I can tell you, I think this is what you should do, or I think that's what you should do, but I'm not a palm reader. I'm a child of God, and so are you, and you got to go to Him and find out what you're supposed to do. You got to go to Him and say, who should I witness to today? How should I share my faith today? I don't feel like I share my faith enough. God, show me how to do that. And He says, well, read my Word, and I'll give you some instructions on how to do that. Well, let me find a gimmick. Let me find a book. Let me find a plan that somebody else has created that helps me do that. No, He wants you to do it because you're His child, and He's going to work directly with you. Because there's no levels with God. We have different jobs, some of us, but there's no levels with God. He's got somebody He wants you to lead to the Lord before they die and go to hell. He's got a lot of those somebodies. But it's a question of whether or not you're going to move on that or not. But anyhow, so now He has a short time. He wants to do as much destruction as possible, but because the saints can now easily defeat Him with the blood of the Lamb and the word of their testimony, Satan must turn to a defensive strategy. See, God's telling us all this. He's preparing us for this time. And it says, He said to Daniel, close the book up because it won't be opened up till the end time, because it wasn't relevant till then. It's becoming relevant. Now we're beginning to see it because it's becoming relevant to us. We may see this time where He's thrown down to earth, and the world is not going to recognize it. They're going to think He's some kind of glorified hero. It just said, we were reading in 13, it says, the beast causes them to worship, right? To worship him. They'll worship him. They'll worship the one that would boil their blood if he had a chance. So, he has a short time. He wants to do as much destruction as he can, moving us into Revelation 13, where Satan brings forth his big guns. Now this is really interesting. I don't know how much time we got. I got a few minutes. I'll go for another 15 minutes or so. But I'm not going to get through all I want to get through unless you encourage me to keep going. But Revelation 13:1, then I stood on the sand of the sea, and I saw a beast rising up out of the sea, having 7 heads and 10 horns, on his horns 10 crowns, and on his heads a blasphemous name. Now, what we're going to find out is that there's assignments of who these are. But I want to show you something that's really cool, and then I'll end. I want to show you something really cool, and then we'll go on next week into this. Revelation 13:2, now the beast which I saw was like a leopard, and his feet were like the feet of a bear, and his mouth like the mouth of a lion. The dragon gave him his power, his throne, and great authority. And I saw one of his heads if had been mortally wounded, and his deadly wound was healed, and all the world marveled and followed the beast. So they worshiped the dragon who gave authority to the beast, and they worshiped the beast, saying, who is like this beast? Who is able to make war with him? So he's going to be some sort of a being that can't die. And I like this because he's considered a beast. It talks about him as if he were a beast. That's not been the case throughout all of biblical history. You know, Hitler might have been evil, but he wasn't a beast. I mean, we could look at him and tell he was a human. Mao Zedong was terrible, but we could look at him and tell he was a human, right? But this thing is going to be something strange. This thing is going to be something strange to the point that people are going to worship him. Who is like this beast? Who is able to make war with him? We can't defeat him. Well, you know what? Somebody can make war with him. It's called the saints of God. By the blood of the Lamb and the word of the testimony, we can make war against him, but we may give up our lives doing that. That's what it says, right? Even to the point of death. Now the World War above all world wars is about to begin, right? That's what's going to happen. That's what's happening here. The World War above all world wars is about to begin. But there is always a but. Yeah, I always got a but. You need to say something that's important, and I'm going to go on before we go on to the next part. I want to go on to this part. Daniel 7. In the first year, 7:1, the first year of Belshazzar, king of Babylon, Daniel had a dream and a vision of his head while in his bed. And visions of his head while in his bed. Then he wrote down the dream, telling the main facts. Daniel spoke, saying, I saw in my vision by night, and behold, the 4 winds of heaven were stirring up the great sea. Now, we just read about this thing coming out of the sea, right? We just read about it in 13, come out of the sea. Whoa, okay, here we are. Daniel, hundreds and hundreds of years before, is seeing this same thing, and he wrote it down before it was ever written here. But I'm going to show you something that's going to be kind of cool. In the first year, and 7:3, and 4 great beasts came up from the sea, each different from the other. The first was like a lion. Did we read about a lion in this? Yeah, has a mouth of a lion. Okay. And he had eagle's wings. I watched till his wings were plucked off, and it was lifted from the earth and made it stand on 2 feet like a man, and a man's heart was given to him. I'm going to show you something that's going to kind of shock you. You're going to say, this is weird. Why didn't we see this? And suddenly another beast, a second like a bear. We got a bear here? Yeah, the feet of a bear. Yeah, like a bear. It was raised up on a side and 3 ribs in his mouth between his teeth. And they said, thus to it arise and devour as much flesh, right? Ooh, sounds like a bad guy. But we got a lion from Revelation 13, and we got a bear from Revelation 13, but we're in Daniel 7. After this I looked, and there was another like a leopard, which had its back 4 wings of a bird. The beast also had 4 heads, and dominion was given to it, right? So we've got all the same 4 animals. After this I saw a night vision, behold, a 4th beast going up, dreadful and terrible, exceedingly strong. It had huge iron teeth. It was devouring, breaking in pieces, trampling the residue with its feet. It was different from all the other beasts that were before it, and it had 10 horns. Whoa, didn't we just read that about the 10 horns in Revelation 13? So we got some kind of a weird parallel going here. Let's keep... I was considering the horns, and there was another horn, a little one, coming up among them, before whom the 3 of the first horns were plucked out by the roots. And there in this horn were eyes like the eyes of man, and a mouth speaking pompous words. Now, this isn't Daniel's first, right? His first, we're probably somewhat familiar with his vision, the interpretation of the king's dream, right? You remember the king's dream? The huge statue made of various metals representing the history of world control prior to and during the time of Jesus, right? And we're going to look at that, okay? Keep going up. The secret was revealed in Daniel in a vision during the night. So Daniel praised God. Oh, I love this. I just had to save this. This isn't part of the whole thing, but this is what Daniel did. The secret was revealed to Daniel in a vision during the night. So Daniel praised the God of heaven. Isn't that cool? You know, you have some kind of a sordid, weird nightmare, and he's up like, whoa, praise God. But anyhow, he said, praise God's name from everlasting to everlasting because he's wise and powerful. He's wise and powerful. He knows he can reveal this to us if we just but pay attention. If we just say, okay, what am I supposed to do about this? Look at what Daniel says. He changes times and periods of history. He removes kings and establishes them. He gives wisdom to those who are wise and knowledge to those who have insight. He reveals deeply hidden things. He knows what is in the dark, and light lives with him. God of my ancestors, I thank and praise you. You gave me wisdom and power. You told me answers to our question. You told us you told us what the king wants to know. We get to know what presidents and leaders and everybody else would like to know. We get to know that from the Word of God while they're not looking at it. But we got to say, God, what do you want me to do with this? Where do I fit in this? I want to wake up in the morning and praise you after a dream that tells me what you want me to do with this. I want to praise God. I want to praise God. I want this kind of stuff to be happening to me. And it should be. It should be, because we're seated next to Jesus, next to God in heavenly places in the spirit realm. Well, Pastor, you can say all that, but not so much for me. Well, you get to choose to do that. Daniel chose to do that. Paul chose to do that. John, Luke, Matthew, on and on the list goes. Elisha chased Elijah down the last day, chased him all over the countryside saying, I want this. If you're going to go up today, I want this. He chased him down. When do we start chasing down God? He says, draw near to me. And James says, draw near to me, I'll draw near to you. He doesn't say, I'll draw near to you and then you draw near to me. He says, draw near to me and I'll draw near to you. He wants to know if you're really serious about this. But I want to go through something, and I'm going to show you something. I'm trying to hurry a little bit because I want you to see what I was going to show you in Daniel's, the 7th chapter. But we'll come back to that in a second, and you'll see this and you'll say, oh, didn't see that before. Okay, go on. Okay. His other dream was the statue, right? The huge statue, right? The Babylon was the head of gold. The Babylon and King Nebuchadnezzar, that was the head of gold, right? And then the Persia, the breastplate, was the second one, right? That was the one made out of silver. And then Greece was the waist and thighs of bronze, right? These are all things that came true just as it was. I mean, you see what happens? Babylon, King Nebuchadnezzar, ruler of the world, of the known world at the time. He was vicious. I don't know how Daniel could be around him. This guy did things, and of course then he went insane and ate grass for a while. But he was, and then he praised God. But it starts out with a head of gold. And then it's a breastplate of silver, which is Persia, right? And then it's Greece, the waist and thighs of bronze, keep going up. And then Rome with the legs of iron. This is when Jesus was there, right? And then we got one after that. It's going to come up in a second, I think. And then Europe, the feet of iron and clay, is a mixture of the iron of Rome and the clay, kind of crumbles. It's not so great. It's not so powerful. So these all came to pass, right? These all came to pass. Jesus was right in this time, the legs of iron and the European iron and clay. And what I want you to see is there is a very specific evolution of power from one to the next. Now, each one grew weaker, right? Nebuchadnezzar was gold, and then it goes down to silver, and then it goes down to bronze, and then it goes down to iron, and then it goes down to kind of a mixture of iron and clay. Each one's getting weaker, but there's a very specific progression of power of man. You might even say a man as they led these countries. Rome, it was Caesar's, right? And it was more diluted as you went down. It started out with King Nebuchadnezzar, and then each level as you go down, the leadership is more diluted, and there's more and more people involved in the leadership, and less power and authority worldwide. So I want you to see, I don't know if I'm going to make this clear to you guys. I'm going to try. Not that you're not smart enough to understand it, it's whether or not I'm good enough to communicate it. This was a statue, and this was a man, and it went from the head down to the feet. Just boom, 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 boom. It was all man, right? Now we come back. Let's look at Revelation 13 again. The vision of a man or men ruling various parts of the world for segments of history leading up to and including Jesus. Revelation 13 represents these world leaders not as men but as animals, specifically beasts, right? Before it was all men, and it was practical things of man: gold, silver, helmet, head, breastplate, the whole thing. It went right down the list. But I want you to see something. Keep going up. But these beasts show up in Daniel 7, also coming from the sea, right? We just did this. 4 great beasts come from the sea, each different from the other. The first was like a lion, eagle wings. I watched as the eagle's wings were plucked off. That's probably was Nebuchadnezzar as he went crazy. He was sent out in the desert. And lion was the king of the jungle and all that kind of stuff. Plucked off and lifted up from the earth and made to stand on 2 feet like a man, and man's heart was given to it. He was given a heart. Nebuchadnezzar was given a heart, and he changed after he spent the time nuts out in the desert. But then suddenly another beast came, second like a bear. It was raised up one side and 3 ribs in its mouth, and said, "Go eat, rise and devour much flesh." And then after this I looked, there was another like a leopard. We just went through all this, right? And then the 4th beast comes, huge iron teeth, and he's got a horn, and there's a little horn, and all that stuff, just like we're going to read in Revelation 13. But these beasts were all individuals. See, we started out with individual world leaders. Nebuchadnezzar, down it goes, right? Silver, bronze, clay, iron, clay. And then Daniel speaks of this, and he says, this beast came out of the sea, and he was like this. And this beast came out of the sea, and he's like that. And this beast comes out of the sea, and he's like that. But you see, when Satan is thrown down to the earth, that's where we are now, right? When Satan is thrown down to the earth, I want you to see something. Go up. Then I stood in the sand of the sea, the same place, he's coming from the sea. And I saw a beast rising above the sea, having 7 heads, 10 horns. His horns were 10 crowns on his heads. Blessed was his name. Now the beast which I saw was like a leopard. His feet was like... Now you're saying, well, you're just describing the same thing. No, I'm not. Because the other ones were all individuals over periods of history and time. As we get to this place where the birthing pangs turn into birthing, it's not several anymore. It's a conglomerate of one hugely powerful beast with all the negative characteristics of the ones that progressed through time over the last 2,000, 3,000, 4,000 years. You see that? You see that? This is going to be, if I can say it this way, all hell's going to break loose. Because it's no longer this guy, and then when he doesn't make it, there's this guy, and this guy's like an eagle, and then he's like a lion, and then this guy's like a leopard, and this guy's like a this, and this guy's like a that. No, look at this, they're all one together. And we haven't even got to the beast that comes out of the earth yet. But I saw the beast rising up out of the sea, having 7 heads and 10 horns, and on his horns 10 crowns, and on his head blasphemous name. Now this beast which I saw like a leopard, his feet were like the feet of a bear, his mouth like the mouth of a lion. The dragon gave him his power, his throne, and great authority. Satan is blasting the whole thing out. You ever gone to fireworks and you knew when it was the end of the fireworks? Why do you know it's the end of the fireworks? Because at the end it all goes crazy, right? All the big ones come out. They've been peddling, showing you this one, showing you that one, woo, and then all of a sudden, whoa, it's bam, 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 every direction you looked. Well, this is what's coming, folks. And God is looking for His church individually to develop a strategy. We've tried to do it in the past. We've done it in the past with large church organizations, and they fail. They fail. They tried it with Constantine tried it with Christianity. Oh, we're going to win the world over through Christianity. And it turned into a mob of monks that went around killing people and imprisoning them and burning them at the stake and everything else. Didn't represent Christ at all. Didn't work. Then we've had the Mormons come, and they tried their way, and the Jehovah's Witnesses, and they tried their way, and on the list goes. The Hindus, the Buddhists, on and on goes the list of large organizations. That's not God's plan. His plan is for an awakened individual church that knows what they're supposed to be doing in this whole thing. Instead of looking to somebody else, looking to some organization to do what we're supposed to do, because that helps us. All we got to do is go and sit in the pew. We just go and sit in the pew and say a couple amens and nod our heads, sing a couple songs, and go home. I've been to church, but I'm not in the army. I'm not a soldier in the army. What happens I know what happens in business meetings, but think of it in military meetings or in your business. You go in and you have a conference and they say this, we need to do this, we need to strengthen this, we need to come get better at that, we need to do this, we need to do that. And you go back and say, well, that was fun. And then you don't do any of them. And then a month later they have another meeting and say, give us a status of where you are. We just praise God He doesn't ask us for a status report. Because if He asked us for a status report, I think it would be woefully short of what God has called us to do. He gave us revelation so we'd have a strategy. He purposely didn't open it to the end times because it wouldn't be meaningful to the people prior to us. We're finally beginning to see this. You know how many times I've read these things? You know how many commentaries I've read on these things? And not once. This just came to me when I was studying it this week. It says, wait a minute. This is one huge conglomerate beast that has all the negative attributes of all the little beasts that came before. And they were nasty. They were terrible. What happens when Hitler and Mao Zedong and some guys, what are some other crazy guys that we could list? What happens if they all come together? That's what's coming. That's what's coming. These guys are getting their heads together. And you don't think they are? You don't think they are? What about Bill Gates and Warren Buffett? And I can go down the list of these guys. They get together, don't they? It used to be that these little nations would get together individually. But now they're starting to get together on large scales. And I'm not a conspiracy theorist, apart from Satan's got a conspiracy against the church. But I'm not a conspiracy theorist, but you hear about these Bilderberg meetings and all this kind of stuff, where these people get together and plot their evil. They plot their evil. How can we manipulate people into wanting socialism? Well, it's real simple. We just give them fake news all the time. We lie to them all the time. And they're like bobbleheads. Yeah, okay, sounds good to me. And then we Christians, we see it and we say, oh my gosh, what's going on here? These people are being just lured into this crap, excuse me. And we go to them and say something, they're saying, their bobblehead starts turning, I can't believe that the news media would lie to us. I've seen CBS do these wonderful commercials and they talk about how nice their network guys are and all this stuff, and they're so wonderful. How could we think that they're lying to us? And then suddenly they're all exposed with all kinds of sexual perversion and stuff like that, and they sweep out the closet a little bit, and then they go back to doing what they were doing. And we're supposed to just keep bobbling our head for them. We got to get serious about this. We got kids. We're responsible for our kids. We're responsible for our nation. We're responsible for what's going on. And you say, well, how do you do that? I can't tell you how to do that. I wish I could. I wish I could say, let's all line up and do this or all line up and do that. But what you really have to do is you have to search your heart and say, God, what do you want me to do? What am I called to do? What am I supposed to be doing with this talent that you gave me? What am I supposed to be doing with this awareness, this knowledge? Think about it. Study. Ask Him to show you. Spend time with Him. Listen to what He's saying. Because I'll tell you this, and I'm sure there's many good churches out there, many, many, many good churches. But by and large, the churches that I have encountered, I think I'm right at close to 130. I know of 116 churches where I've spoke the message. And I would say that 99% of those pastors are in the same feeling, the same thoughts, the same track that I'm in. And they're very concerned about preparing their congregation. But there's a whole bunch of them out there that wouldn't even have me come and speak at their church, because that's not how we're thinking. That's not how we're going. That's not what that's not what we want to do with our people. That's, and I'm saying, wait a minute, you don't want your people to know the Word, know His voice, and know His will for their lives. Now, we're not really headed that way, Jim. That's not our thing. And you'd be surprised how many I hear. And you know what? I would say 90% of the time, God sends me to the right church, and the guy said, yes, yes, yes. That's exactly what I'm trying to do in my church. I'm trying to prepare my people for what's coming. But see, people, oh gosh, Jim, you got to get positive thinking, spend a couple weekends at one of those big churches in Texas where they tell you how everything's so wonderful and you just have to claim it. What you need to claim is the power and authority that you have in Christ's name above. Oh, you guys wait. You're going to get mad at me, but you wait. I've told you that the blood is to protect us. The blood is protecting us, right? We plead the blood over everything, keep thinking it keeps Satan away. We're the one that keeps Satan away by the blood of the Lamb and word of our testimony. But I'm going to put this on the lintel and doorpost. The blood is to protect us from the wrath of God. You want to put the blood on some lintel and doorpost, put it on your own, because you want the spirit of death to pass over you. Protect your houses, folks. It's for me and my house, we're going to serve the Lord. Choose you this day. But I hate to even say this, because without the full teaching, you might really get mad at me, but Jesus said to His disciples, there's going to come a day you don't need to use my name anymore. And I'll never stop using His name, don't get me wrong. What He was trying to tell them is that they would have the same authority in the spirit realm over Satan. We're not deity, we're not, although we contain deity, He lives within us. But He said there's coming a time where you won't even need to use my name. You can go boldly to the throne of God. It says in Hebrews, you can go boldly to the throne of God. You can go boldly before the throne of God. Say, God, I need some help here. I need some help here. I'm fighting for Jesus, the bridegroom. I'm the bride. I'm trying to figure out what I need to do down here to get more of the bride, in the flock. Help me, Lord, help me. And I'll bet you, I may be wrong, but I'll bet you He doesn't say get more orange juice, coffee, and donuts. I'm just saying. That's probably not His battle plan. Although I like the donuts, I like the coffee and orange juice, and we're going to have some snacks here in a minute. So, but I don't think that's the battle plan. You're in the army now, and you go to mess hall and you say, I like this mess hall. I think I'm just going to stay here. Let those other guys take their weapons out there and shoot and all that. I don't want any part of that. I'm just going to stay in the mess hall. I really like the mess hall. There's too many Christians in the mess hall. Father, I praise You and I thank You and I give You the glory in Jesus' precious name. Help us as we move forward into this, Father God. Don't let us miss what there is for each and individual. All we're trying to do is throw the carrot out there, or whatever you want to say, Lord. My job is just simply to provide information, and Your Holy Spirit works in their hearts to draw them nearer to You, Father God, and to get better at the plan. Father, I praise You and I give You all the glory in Jesus Christ's name. Amen. Amen. So next week, and I don't know if I'll be able to do this or not, but next week, if I can, I know that you guys are going to be gone, and you guys are going to be gone. The camera's off, right?